Welcome back to the August 2024 edition of the Garden Embroidery Journal, where we're going to take inspiration from the garden to inspire our embroidery for the month. This is August, and as you can see, I will be working on marigolds. I am using the Creative Stitches for Contemporary Embroidery by Sharon Boggon. And I am starting with the Basque Stitch, which is not one that I had tried before. I did do a little sample preparation on this green fabric to sort of get my idea together before I started on my large regular hoop that is containing my monthly circles this time. So I just wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing because I had never done the stitch before, and I wanted to try layering a bunch of different colors this time, which was not something I had done. And rather than picking it out of my main thing, I decided to use a little scrap and do sort of like a sketch or a practice run. So then once I liked that, I decided to jump into my monthly divided hoop, and I used a little button that I had to create a circle to sort of give myself the framework of working around with the stitch. And I loved the marigold, so I'm trying to capture that really fluffy texture. This one is, I believe the variety on these is called Fireball or something, but mine doesn't have quite as much layers of color as I wanted, but I really wanted to just experiment with that this month, and I thought that stitch, this Basque Stitch, would work really well for that, so I selected 3 different colors. I'm using like the bright orange, sort of like a salmon-y color orange, and then like a golden yellow. To get started, I came up from behind and I'm going down right next to that spot, and then you wrap the floss around your needle in basically like a figure 8 shape, and you hold it in place, and then I inevitably have to pick out of course knots as I'm working, and just sort of use your thumb on your non-dominant hand to hold it in place a little bit, and then you come up underneath of your lower part of your figure 8, sort of like how you would make a lazy daisy, and then pull it tight, like pull your figure 8 tight around your needle. And I did struggle a little bit, not gonna lie, to keep everything from twisting and to lay where I wanted it to lay. It does take a little practice, but it isn't too tricky to work with. And then you slide your floss back up, kind of catching the bottom of that 8 and then coming up at the top, and then you come down next to it. You leave your needle in a little bit, push it down so where you can wrap your needle and make that figure 8. Again, I'm using my non-dominant thumb to hold it where I wanted it to be, catching or untwisting things, making them lay the way I want, and then catching the bottom and looping around it with a stitch and coming back up at the top so that you're having a little catch stitch at the top and the bottom to hold your figure 8 in place. And I think that worked really well. Obviously, if you want the most clear and concise and proper directions, then I would check out the Creative Stitches for Contemporary Embroidery book by Sharon Boggon, and I will link it down below for you if you don't have that one already. I think I've used it in the past and I'm really enjoying it. There's lots of very interesting stitches in there, and I really like all of her samples too. Like when you're looking through it, there's a lot of really inspirational art samples. So I basically used that circle to work around, and that was my outer layer of petals. And then I went back in and I came up about 1/8 of an inch and started the next row. So I was looking for holes in between the last row that I had done and the going in between them so that you could still see the texture and the layers of my next rows, but the stitch was the same. And I also tried to keep my stitch length basically the same length as well, so that would sit up 1/8 from where my other stitches ended also. and you get this really nice layered effect once you start like putting them together. She doesn't show it too much like that, I don't believe, in the book, but I felt like it worked really well for creating these marigold petals. And I just worked my way around in layers until I was really happy with it. So once I had all of my dark orange, I switched to that like salmony sort of color, and I added layers in the same way, just like looking for pockets in between the last ones that I had done. I will say that once I started to add more and more layers, it was harder to find holes, and then it was also harder to get everything to lay flat and not like get twisted up on itself. So you can see I struggled a little bit here and there, and I had to like pick stuff out. But overall, I really was happy with it, and it was giving the effect that I wanted. So a little bit of struggling here and there, trying something new doesn't really bother me too much. And I just kind of kept going. Once I got to the layer, I didn't go the whole way around with the orange. And then once I got to the salmony color, I did start to pull it up higher on my circle to close my circle. And I did this because when I had made my sample, I hadn't gone the whole way. I hadn't really even intended to finish that so much, just because I was practicing. But then I noticed that if I took different layers of the color up around the circle at different depths, that it sort of gave the impression of like the flower being tilted a little bit away from you. And I felt like that gave a nice movement to my flower, and really was the look that I wanted. It wasn't so flat, like straight on in your face. It gave a little bit more of like this, the flower was slightly tilted away. And so I decided to do that again whenever I made my piece on here. So you'll see that only some of my layers come the whole way up around, mainly this salmon color. And then when I go in with the golden yellow, I'm sort of filling in the center that's left. And I wasn't really worried if it ended up being super perfect, because it was really hard to keep it working in a perfect circle. And I think that's fine. Flowers obviously are not perfect, perfectly round. And I think that it added a lot to the general look of my piece. Like I said, I did struggle as I got more and more layers, and it was hard to like not have the needle running into things on the other side and snagging the different threads and everything. But overall it worked really good. Sometimes it came off, and then I would just like fuss with rethreading it and all of that business. But generally I was able to, when I got to the end of the stitches, I would just draw it down over the top and end it like that with a little knot in the back. So then I added the gold, like I said, and I just sort of did my best to fill in. That layer was a little bit looser than the previous ones. There were less holes to find, and I just tried to get it to have that like fluffy filled in look. I brought those up around the top a little bit higher, and then I went about sketching out my letters for the month. So it's August, and I just did that same back stitch in a color of floss that coordinated with my petals. So I used that bright orange. I was really feeling the orange this month. To me, August is like a really orange, bright, hot month, or at least it is in Pennsylvania where I live. And so I wanted to capture the spirit of that, and also have something that was bold enough to stand up to the rest of what I had stitched. So I chose that, and I used only 3 strands to do the back stitching on the title of the month. But I did use 6 strands. I don't know if I mentioned that. I did use 6 strands to do all of the petals, which probably was why it was getting caught a lot, but that's okay. I wanted that big puffy look. So then to do my stems and little petals, I think I continued to use 6 strands on this. I can't exactly tell from here, but I just did a back stitch, and then to create that little petal effect, I just made a stitch and then almost like a little, I don't know what the real term for it is, but almost like a little vase or like a little, just like a little V, couple of V's that came together to create that like frond look that a marigold leaf has. I wasn't really worried about if it was like perfectly looking like that. I'm trying to capture the spirit of things. It's not a photograph of the marigold. It's just something that reminds me of the texture and the vibe and like the spirit of the plant and the month itself in my garden. And I'm pretty happy with the way that it looks overall. And I just filled in, you know how the base of the marigold has a little bit wider vase, so I've just filled that in with some satin stitches. And overall, I think I did a good job. It really has a good color. I think the colors worked out really well, and I loved that layering of the color and the stitch itself. And here it is next to my little puffy plant in the garden. And that one is just so beautiful, right on the corner of a little walkway that we have. And it really captured, to me, the spirit of the month. So my advice for this month is mix old and new stitches to keep it spicy yet manageable. You don't have to overdo it. Again, it's summer. We're all really busy. And then I am just trying different things, different layers again, and I loved how it turned out. And particularly on this one, I wasn't worrying if it was perfect. Not every one of my figure 8 stitches laid super flat. Some of them stuck up. Some of the stitches got split a little bit. But I think that adds to the texture, particularly with this design. So I was overall happy. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like and subscribe.